Hello, sixth graders. We are on our probability unit. Our first video lesson today is on simple events, and our learning target is I can find the probability of a simple event. Okay, so everything on this slide you should have written down in your notes. So first we have a vocab word, probability. This is the likelihood of something happening, or what are the chances that something happens. And it's always written between 0 and 1, either as a fraction between 0 and 1, or as a percent. And if it's written as a percent, it's between 0 and 100. And then the likelihood, or with probability, we can use this table or graph to help us decide, based on the probability that we are getting, just how likely it is to happen. So what it's saying, if you ended up with a probability of 0 or 0%, that means it's impossible. It's not going to happen. So if it was rolling a dice and they were asking you the probability of 10, well, there's not 10 on a six-sided dice, so the probability would be 0. It's impossible. It can't happen. On the other side, if you get a probability of 1 or 100, that means it's certainly going to happen. So if you were saying the probability of flipping a coin and it lands on heads or tails, that is certain. It's for sure going to either land on heads or tails. And then it kind of ranges in between there. Okay, another vocab word you should write everything on this slide as well. Simple event. This is one experiment happens at a time with one outcome. Okay, so, and then it gives us examples here of common simple events. Rolling a dice, flipping a coin, picking a card, picking an item out of a bag. Those are all events. There's something that you are doing, and then we are finding the probability of that event happening. So make sure you have all of that written down. Okay, so we talked about simple event and probability, but now we need to talk about outcome. Okay, well, the outcomes are what happened in an event. Okay, so when we are talking about, sorry, let me finish writing this. Okay, so if we were talking about rolling a dice, an outcome could be that it lands on 6. So an example is that it, hold on. Okay, so that's an outcome. Another outcome of a dice is that it lands on 5, or it lands on a 4. For a coin, an outcome could be that it lands on heads, or the outcome could be that it lands on tails. There's 2 outcomes. Random, just like you think, random. It's not more likely than something else to happen. It's just random. And then we will get to complementary events. So make sure you have outcome written down for now. Okay. Then I want you to write this box down for probability. If all outcomes, again, that's what happens when we do an event or roll a dice, flip a coin, whatever it might be. If all outcomes are equally likely, the probability of a simple event is a ratio that compares the number of favorable outcomes to the number of possible outcomes. So if we were asking, and we always write it, we'll do this as a fraction, number of favorable outcomes, what it is that you're looking for or that you're trying to get, over number of possible outcomes, however many outcomes there are. Okay. So we'll go through this after we go through an example here. It'll make a little bit more sense if you're kind of confused. So the question says, what is the probability of rolling an even number, so that's the favorable outcome, on a number cube with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 on its faces? So all of those numbers, those are the possible outcomes. So when we roll a dice, we could roll a 1, a 2, a 3, a 4, 5, or a 6. So there's 6 possible outcomes. The favorable outcomes, that's what we're looking for, the even numbers. Those would be 2, 4, 6. That's 3 numbers. And that would simplify to 1/2. So the probability that with a 6-sided dice that you roll an even number is 1/2. So it's a 50% chance you'll roll an even number. That means a 50% chance you'll roll an odd number. Okay, some more practice here with simple events. Use the number cube, so again, that number cube 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, to write as a fraction in simplest form. So the probability of odd numbers. Again, we could roll a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. So there's 6 possible outcomes. And we have a 1, a 3, or a 5 are odd numbers, so that's 3 possible. And then that simplifies to 1/2. Okay, the probability of rolling a 5 or a 6. Well, again, on a number cube, there's 6 possible outcomes. You could roll a 5, that's 1 favorable outcome that we're looking for, or you could roll a 6, that's 2 numbers on the number cube. So then that would simplify to 1/3. So there's a 1/3 chance you'll roll a 5 or a 6. The probability of a prime number. Well, thinking about prime, that means it's divisible by 1 and itself. It has 2 factors. So on our list, that could be 2, 3, or 5. Remember, 1 is not prime because its only factor is 1. So that's 3 numbers out of the 6 total, which is 1/2. All right, some more probability here. So, and if you are confused, I guess I didn't go through this. P in parentheses, that means the probability of whatever is inside the parentheses. So that's what you're trying to figure out for. So for this first one, we're trying to figure out the probability of flipping a tails. So talking about a coin, well, on a coin, how many total outcomes are there? I could either flip heads or I could flip tails. That's 2 outcomes, but we're looking for tails, which is 1 of the 2 outcomes. So there's a 1/2 chance that you'll flip tails. Okay, probability, and then just read it with whatever's inside the parentheses. So probability of picking a red card out of a deck of cards. Well, I know that there are 52 cards in a deck, and if I were to go through and count all of the ones that are red, there would be 26, or I know that half of it is. So that simplifies to 1/2. So if you were trying to pick a card at random and hope that it's red, you'd have a 50-50 chance you pick a red card. Okay, picking a spade, the probability of picking a spade card. Well, again, there's 52 cards in the deck. And if you went through spades, there's ace, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, jack, queen, king, which is 13 cards. And then if we were to simplify this, 13 over 52 would simplify to 1/4. So there's a 1/4 chance that when you pick a card at random that it'll be spades. The probability of picking a 3 out of the deck. Well, again, there's 52 cards in the deck. There's the 3 of hearts, the 3 of diamonds, the 3 of clubs, and the 3 of spades. That's 4 possible outcomes out of the 52. And if we simplify that, that simplifies to 1/13. All right. The probability of picking the 7 of diamonds. Well, again, 52 cards. The probability of 7 of diamonds. That's only 1 card. There's only 1 7 of diamonds in the whole deck. So that is 1 out of 52, which that's a pretty small probability. So the chance, if I had a full deck and I just picked 1 card at random, there's a pretty small chance that it's that 7 of diamonds. However, the chance that I pick the red card, there's a much better chance that it would be red. All right. If there are 10 flowers in a basket and 5 are Gerber daisies, 3 are lilies, and 2 are sunflowers, we're trying to figure out a couple probability questions based on that. So first, the probability of picking a Gerber daisy. Well, that told me that there was 5 of them. And here it told me that there was 10, which is our bottom number. The total outcomes goes on the bottom, and that would simplify to 1/2. Probability of picking a sunflower. Well, here it's telling me there's 2 sunflowers, so that goes on the top. Total outcomes on the bottom, which is 10, so that would simplify to 1/5. So a much better probability that you would pick a Gerber. Now, again, all of these events that are happening are at random. They are all equally as likely to happen. There's not one that outweighs the other. Okay, so we're looking here at these, so again, random events. They're all equally likely to happen, and we're just trying to figure out the probability that they would. So the table shows the number of brass instrument players in the New York Philharmonic. Suppose one brass instrument player is randomly selected to be a featured performer. find the probability of each event and write it as a fraction in simplest form. So the first one, again, probability of whatever's in the parentheses. So probability of a trumpet. Looking at the chart over here, we've got 3 trumpet players over the total. So here we would have to add. So 6 plus 4 is 10, plus 3 plus 1 would be 14. So there's 3 out of 14 chance that it will be a trumpet player. Okay, and I don't think that can be simplified. Oops. Let's make sure this is lettered correctly. Okay. E, the probability that they are a brass player. Well, brass is all of them. So 14 out of 14, you would add them all together. Horn, trombone, trumpet, tuba, all of those are brass, which is 1. So if that's telling us if we were to pick at random, it's for sure going to be a brass player. Next one, the probability of a flute. Well, I don't see any flutes, so the chance that you would pick a flute, you can't. There's 0 flutes out of the 14. So it's impossible to pick a flute player. And the last one, the probability of a horn or tuba. Anytime you see that word or, you're going to add them together. So there's 6 horns and 1 tuba, which equals 7 out of the 14 players. So 1/2. So outcome you're looking for over the total number of outcomes. Okay, so complementary events. If I were to say what's the probability of on a dice rolling a 5 out of 6-sided dice, that's 1 out of 6. The complementary to that would be the probability of not rolling a 5. Well, if there's one outcome that is a 5, that means the rest of them are not a 5. So that means that 5 of them out of the 6 are not going to be rolling a 5. If I were to add these together, 1/6 and the 5/6, that should always equal 1. So the complementary is pretty much the opposite of whatever you're looking for. If we were talking about a spinner with 4 different colors on it, and I said the probability of spinning red, the complementary to that would be not spinning red, so the opposite, whatever you're not looking for. And it will always equal up to 1, because if you don't spin a red, then that leaves you every other color on the board, which we'll see here. Okay, so Ramon's teacher uses a spinner similar to the one shown at the right to determine the order in which each group will make their presentation. Use the spinner to find each probability right as a fraction in simplest form. So the first one, the probability that it's not group 4. So what we could do is we could figure out how many of them are group 4, which is 1 out of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So then that would mean the probability of not 4 would be the remainder of that. So I could take 1 minus that 1/6, which would be 5/6. So the probability of not group 4 would be 5/6. Next one, the probability group that it's not group 1 or 3. Well, group 1 or 3, that's 2 out of the 6. So not 1 or 3. I could take 1 and subtract off that probability. Okay, we're finding the opposite, whatever's left, which would be 4/6, simplifies to 2/3. Okay, so there's 4 other numbers that are not a 1 or 3. So those are complementary. And again, if I were to add these up, they would equal 1. Okay, so here I want you to pause on your pause this part of the video, and these 3 questions you are going to complete at the bottom of your note page, and then when you're done, we'll first write your answers as fraction in simplest form and as a percent. Okay, think about how we turn fractions into percents. Numerator divide by denominator. But after you have completed these 3 problems, you'll take a picture of your notes and submit them on Schoology. Okay, so number 1, we're talking about cards. Number 2, the probability if it is snowing, then what's the probability that it's not snowing? And then number 3, we're looking at marbles. So we're trying to figure out the probability of picking a red one and the probability of not picking a purple, so every other color. So complete these at the bottom of your notes. I'm not going to go through them. They're kind of like a little check-in for me.